Today I'm going to cover how to take a YAML automation and recreate it using the Home Assistant UI for people that have no knowledge of YAML whatsoever. Welcome to ResinChem Tech. Now, a lot of people share their automation, sometimes their entire Home Assistant configuration online. And you may have run across an automation that you would like to be able to duplicate, but don't have a lot of experience with YAML. And sometimes even if you do have experience with YAML, copying and pasting these from someone else into your Home Assistant instance doesn't always go as planned. There can be a lot of variations on how Home Assistant is set up, and just copying and pasting often doesn't work. So what I'm going to do today is first I'm going to talk about the anatomy of automations, and then I'm going to show you how to take one of my automations done in YAML and recreate that using the Home Assistant UI. Now, if you want to skip around some of these parts, or there's things I talk about that you already know, there are chapter links down in the video description. You can also use the little timing bar down here to jump ahead to the parts that might interest you. But let's go ahead and get started. Automations consist of three primary parts. There are one or more triggers, optional conditions, and one or more actions. Now, you'll see these same kind of sections whether we're talking about Home Assistant or whether you're talking about Google Assistant routines or Amazon She Who Shall Not Be Named routines. Routines is just what they call automations, or if you're using something like if this then that. You'll still see these, at least the triggers and the actions, and optionally the ability to specify conditions. So we talk about triggers. A trigger is an event or something that happens that's going to cause your automation to fire or to start and run the routine. For example, it could be a door opening or motion detection or a time of day or sunrise, sunset. It could be anything that the system's going to watch for, and when that happens, it's going to start executing your automation. Conditions are one or more checks that we want to be sure that are true before we continue to run the action part of our automation. Again, you can have multiple conditions, and these are optional. You might not have any conditions, but they can be combined with and or. So if you have multiple conditions, you can say and, which means they both must be true, or in case one or the other has to be true. And they can be based on many of the same events or entities or states as triggers. So as an example, if we say we want to turn on the living room light when motion is detected, again, motion would be our trigger, turning on the light is going to be the action, but we only want to do this if it is after sunset and before sunrise, or we only want to do it on a certain day of the week, or we only want to do it based on the state of another entity. Say, for example, the kitchen lights are off. So again, we can limit the execution of this automation based on other events or other entity states. And then finally are the actions. Those are the step or steps we want to perform once we've had the trigger fire and we've passed all the conditions. Again, this can be single or multiple steps. We can also actually call a script or a scene that have other multiple steps in it. And they can get pretty complex, but some simple examples: turn on a light, send a notification, increase or decrease a particular number. So those are the three primary steps. And so if we take a look at YAML over here on one side and our Home Assistant UI automation on the other side, you're going to again see trigger, condition, and action, triggers, conditions, and actions. The alias you see at the top is really just the name of the automation. So again, all we've got to do is basically migrate each of these conditions or actions or triggers underneath each one using the UI. That's what we're going to do next. As an example, we're going to use the automation that I created for my stair lights. A number of viewers have reached out to me while they've been able to successfully build the lights. They've had issues with trying to integrate my YAML into their Home Assistant. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that. I use a split configuration. It's not so much just a copy and paste. You also have to create a couple of what's known as helpers. So we're going to use this one as our example of how to take my YAML for the stair lights, easily recreate that through the Home Assistant UI. Before we begin migrating the YAML using the Home Assistant UI, I wanted to have an idea of the logic that I'm using here, because there are 5 actual separate automations that make up the stair lighting system. The first automation is we're going to turn those stair lights on when we detect motion at the top of the stairs if the lights are currently off. The next one, we're going to turn the lights off with top motion if the lights are already on, most likely because they were turned on by the bottom motion detector. We're going to do the same thing with the bottom motion detector, turn the lights on if they're off, or we're going to turn the lights off if they're on when motion is detected. Finally, we're going to use a timer and create an automation based on when that timer expires. In this case, the timer is used if one motion detector gets tripped, but say someone changes their mind and doesn't continue up or down the stairs, and the second motion detector is never tripped, in which case the lights would stay on indefinitely. So we're going to use a timer. In my case, I use 15 seconds to turn the lights off automatically if the second motion event isn't triggered. So now if we go back up to the top here, I actually described entities that are going to be needed for these automations. Now the first three should be created for you automatically if you've built the system. The light, stair lights, actually comes in through your WLED integration. Now if you've used a different name, you'll just substitute whatever name you used here. And then you should have two binary sensors, one for your top motion detector and one for your bottom motion detector, which come in automatically through your ESP Home integration. However, there are two helpers that we have to create, and we have to create these manually. One of them is that timer I talked about. We need a way to keep track of when the light should be turned off automatically if a second motion event doesn't occur. And then the next one is called an input boolean, or as a toggle, which we'll see over in the UI in a second. And what this does is allows me to easily click a button to enable or disable the whole stair auto LED system. Now what I mean by that is here in my front end of Lovelace, I can now have a single button that is going to enable or disable the entire stair auto lighting system. Again, that is just an input boolean or a toggle that we can turn off or on, and we'll use this as a condition in our automations to determine whether we should run the actions of the auto lights or not. If all that was a bit confusing, don't worry, I think it'll make more sense as we go along and start recreating the automation. So to create both our automations and our helpers, we need to go to the configuration or the little gear icon here in our side menu, and we're going to select automations and scenes. Okay, before we can create our automations though, we do have to create those two helpers. So here along the top menu, you'll find helpers, and we're going to add a new helper. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create that timer. Now first off, if the timer is grayed out or doesn't appear, it's because you don't have the timer integration enabled in your default configuration.yaml. To fix this, all you need to do is open up your configuration.yaml in an editor. Again, the wrench, if you have it enabled, is an editor right within Home Assistant that you can use. But open up your configuration.yaml and scroll down. Make sure that you don't already have a timer, which you probably don't if it was disabled. Now you can see I've used this split configuration I'm talking about. But just go down to find a blank spot, just type in timer and a colon. Save that file and restart Home Assistant, and then the timer will become available to you in the helper screen. Once we have timer available, we're just going to click on that to create a new timer. We're going to simply give this a name, and I'm going to give it the same name that I used in my YAML, stair motion timer. Optionally, this is not required. You can select some kind of icon if you want. I'll go ahead and select a little timer icon. And then we can give it a duration. Now we can either set the duration here or we can set it in our automation. It really doesn't matter. It's probably better to set it in one spot in case you want to edit it. But if you do set it, you need to set this in terms of hours, minutes, and seconds. So that's going to be 15 seconds. So we'll go ahead and hit the create button on that, and that will create our timer for us. So now that we have our timer, we need to create our other helper, which is an input boolean or a toggle. A toggle has a state of either off or on, true or false. So to do that, we click that, and all we have to do is provide a name. I called this stair auto LEDs. Again, you can give it an icon if you want. I don't plan on showing this anywhere on the Lovelace front end, so I'm going to use a button for that. So I really don't care about an icon, and we simply hit create for that as well. Okay, so now that we have our two necessary helpers created, we're ready to start creating our automation. From the same screen, we're just going to go to automations, and we're going to add a new automation. In this case, we're going to start with an empty automation. And if you remember from our anatomy, we've got triggers, conditions, and actions we're going to recreate. So the first thing we're going to do is simply give this the name. I'm going to again use the same names. You're free to use anything that you like. Top motion lights on. I'm going to call mine demo here since I already have one. I'm actually going to create this so we can compare it. We can give a description if we want. That is optional. So now we'll come down and take a look at our triggers. So in the YAML over here, we'll see the trigger. We're using a platform of state. If we drop this box down, we want to match that. Again, we're going to look at the state of an entity. Again, trigger ID we're not going to use here. That's for some more advanced cases where you might have multiple triggers and want to do different actions based on which trigger fired. But all we need to do now, we have the state, is select the entity. Again, here we're going to see that is going to be our binary sensor, our stare motion top. So I can just type in stare motion top, and there it is, our binary sensor stare motion top. We simply select that, and all we want to do is trigger when that goes from off, no motion, to on, motion detected. So we simply put off in here to on. That's it for our trigger. Now we're going to apply a couple of conditions. So we'll scroll down here to conditions, add a condition. Once again, we're going to base this on state. So we drop this down, choose state. Again, what is our entity ID? We're going to look for that toggle that we just created, or in my case, input Boolean stare, if I can spell right, stare auto LEDs. So we're going to make sure that we've got the automations enabled through this helper or this toggle input Boolean. And we're going to make sure that is in a state of being turned on. If that's not true, then we're going to skip all of the actions. In addition, we have a second condition. Remember, in this case, we're going to turn the stare lights on with motion. We only want to do that if the stares are off. So again, we're going to choose a state. Again, looking at our condition here, state, and our entity ID is going to be light.starelights. There they are. And we want to make sure that those are in the state of being off. So those are our two conditions. Next, we're going to run our actions. Now, we're going to set a couple things here with WLED. We're going to set a speed, and we're also going to set whether we want those stare lights to be reversed or not, because we're going to want the stare lights to run one direction if the bottom motion is detected, and the opposite direction if the top motion is detected. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the speed. And that actually, again, is a service. So we're going to call a service, and that service is going to be number, and we want to set a number. So number.set, and now it's going to pop up the little thing that's going to give us a list to choose our entity. So we're going to look for number.stare speed. There it is. And we want to set that value to 220. That's just going to be the speed. Again, you can play with these and change these numbers to match your particular install. So that was our first action. Now we're going to call another action is we're going to set whether these stares should be reversed or not. So we're going to add an action. Once again, we're going to call a service in that action. So we're going to call service, and that service is going to be switch.turnOn. That's if we want them reversed. In a minute, when we do the other motion detector, we're going to take that switch and we're going to turn it off to have the lights run in the other direction. But again, we're going to do switch.turnOn, and the switch that we want to turn on is our stare reverse switch. So again, we're going to choose our entity, stare.reverse. There it is right there for us. Okay. So those are the first two services. Now we've got a third service. We're actually going to turn the lights on in this next step. So we're going to add another action. Once again, it's going to be a service call. And our service is going to be light.turnOn. And of course, the lights we're turning on are going to be our stare lights. So light.stare, there they are. Now, there are some additional attributes that we can set when we turn those lights on. In this particular case, we're going to set the color, in my case, white, and we're going to set which LED effect we want to apply, and that's going to be that wipe effect. So it's pretty easy to do. We come down here to our RGB color, and it says it's going to be a list. We're going to put this in square brackets, which will create a list for us, and we're going to give the red, the green, and the blue color. By setting these all to 255, that's basically going to be white. We're also going to scroll down here. We're going to find our effect. We want to apply a light effect. So we're going to check that, and it's just simply called wipe. Okay, so those are first three actions. Now the final action we're going to take is we're going to start that 15-second timer. So we're going to add one more action. Again, we're going to call a service. And that service is called timer.start. Okay. And we're going to choose which timer we want to start, and that's going to be our timer.stare motion timer. And our duration. Now remember, we selected a duration before when we created the image, so we don't have to do it here, but I'm going to just go ahead and just show you both ways. And we're going to set that again, hours, minutes, and seconds to 15 seconds. So that completes the first automation. One trigger, two conditions, and 4 actions. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit save. That has automatically saved our automation. Now what exactly happened in the background? Let's take a look. So if we jump over to our file editor and we open up our automations.yaml file, we scroll down, we should be able to find the automation that we created. Let me make this a little bit bigger here so you can see it. Okay. And here we go with our top motion with lights on. And remember, I called this one demo. We didn't put a description there, but take a look. Trigger, platform state, entity ID, from off to on. Really, if you look down through here, you'll see that it recreated almost this exact same YAML. There are a couple of minor differences in terms of how it represented the RGB color, but otherwise, it basically created this exact same YAML, almost letter for letter, word for word. Okay, so that's all that's going to happen when you use that the UI. It's really in the background going to create the YAML for you. So let's move on to the next automation. Okay, so now we've created the first automation. Let's move on to the second automation that we need. And we're just going to repeat basically the same steps. We're going to add an automation, start with an empty automation, going to give it a name, top motion lights off, and we're going to recreate the trigger, conditions, and actions. So once again, platform of state, and in this case, we're going to be looking for that top motion detector. So binary sensor stare motion top, going from off to on. We're going to add, in this case, 2 conditions. First, we want to make sure, check the state of the current lights. So light.stare lights. And in this case, we want to make sure that it is on, because remember, we only want to turn the lights off if they were already turned on by another motion event. Again, we're going to add that second condition to make sure that our input Boolean, so we're going to, need to select the state type first. So again, that's going to be the state, and our entity, again, is going to be that helper or input Boolean. Auto LEDs. We want to make sure that that is on. If we've disabled the automation, then we just want to simply skip the rest of the automation. So we only have one action in this case, and we're going to again call a service, and we're going to light.turn off, and what we're going to turn off is our light.stare lights. That's it for the second automation. Very simple, very quick. And again, we create this. If we were to go look at the YAML is going to look basically identical to what you see here. Okay, so we've created the first 2 automations, both dealing with the top motion detector of turning the lights on or turning the lights off. Now we need to do the exact same thing and create 2 automations for our bottom motion detector. I'm not going to go through these because they're identical. The only difference is, again, in our trigger, we're going to look at the stare motion bottom binary sensor instead of the stare motion top. And the only other difference would, again, be with that WLED effect on the reversal of the effect. Instead, in this case, we're going to turn the switch off, which means we don't want the effect reversed. Now, again, your particular installation may be different. You may be turning it on here and off in the other. But otherwise, the automation is exactly the same for turning the lights on and turning the lights back off. Again, except the only difference is going to be the entity ID or the binary sensor that you're going to use, the bottom motion detector instead of the top. We now have one final automation to complete, and that is our timer expiration. So again, if motion is detected that turns the lights on, but the second motion event never occurs, our lights would stay on for an extended period of time. Instead, we're going to use this timer, and if 15 seconds expires without a second motion event, it's going to turn the lights off. So we're going to follow the same process of adding a new automation. We're going to give it a time of stare timer expires, and again I'm going to call mine demo here since I've already got one, and take a look at our trigger. This time it's going to be a platform or a trigger type of event. We've always looked at states before, but this is going to be an event. Now, the one thing about events, at least at the time of this recording, it doesn't give you a drop-down list, but we've got the event type right here in our YAML, so we're going to type in the exact same thing, timer.finished. Then it's asking for event data. Well, our event data is basically this. I'm actually just going to copy and paste that right in there. So that's going to be our trigger. Now we've got a couple of conditions here, so we're going to add those. And again, these are going to be based on our state. What we're really doing here is we're just going to assure that we don't have any stare motion on either one of our motion detectors. So we're going to do the stare motion top having a state of off, and repeat that again for the other motion detector. So state, in this case of our stare motion bottom, is also off. So that takes care of our two conditions. And finally our action, again we're going to call a service. In this case, our service is a light dot turn off, and all we're going to do is turn off our light dot stare LEDs. Okay, that's all we've got to do. Save that, and then let's go over and take a look at the YAML and see how closely that matches the original YAML. So once again, opening up our automations.yaml file, we can scroll down and again find the generated YAML from the UI. And again, we can see that it is nearly identical to the original YAML. So that's all there is to it. So that's it in a nutshell. If you found anything that you liked or found useful about this video, please go ahead and hit that like button down below. That lets both me and YouTube know you'd like to see more videos like this. If you'd also like to see some of my other videos, hit that subscribe button and ding that little bell icon to be notified when I release a new video. Now, I'd like to take just a quick minute to thank those of you that have subscribed to my channel and those of you that have provided support for some of the projects that I do. If you found that I've been particularly helpful for one of your own projects and you'd like to say thanks and support the channel, feel free to buy me a cup of coffee. You can find a link to that down in the video description or on the About page of my channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon.